Pretty sure I'm live. We are going to solve economics. Yep, I'm gonna solve it all right now, but first, we need to take out a notebook. And we're gonna watch a couple videos. I'm gonna comment on them, and we'll start from there. Focus for the video is on macroeconomics, mainly in North America, mainly in United States of America, and I'm mostly concerned with Gen Z, so Gen Z economics. That's like, I think the youngest Gen Z is in high school right now. Middle school or high school, I think. Alright, before we begin with this, what am I going to use as a notebook? Oh yeah, obsidian. Maybe obsidian, perplexity. Yeah, I'll do that. Or Gemini. Perplexity or Gemini. I'm getting out my notebook right now. And AI brain. Alright, let's ask the AI to start off with the prompt. So, what problems do we have right now? Gen Z. Gen Z is broke. Gen Z is broke and doesn't know much. Video. What is a prompt to start with? Give 5. Here's what the AI thinks I should start out with. What if I told you the most of the money you think exists is actually just debt with better branding? Or, Gen Z isn't broke because they're lazy. What if it's because they're playing a game they were never taught the rules to? Nobody explains money properly. So today, I'm breaking down Ray Dalio's economic machine in a way that actually makes sense. You've heard money makes the world go around, but what if debt is the actual thing spinning it? But what if debt is the thing actually spinning it? That one's kind of good. Before you blame yourself for being broke, you need to understand how the system you're in actually works. Let's do the last one. Before you blame yourself for being broke, you need to understand how the system you're in actually works. I think that might be the most accurate one. Because most people do call themselves broke. But somehow we all have iPhones, somehow the vast majority of us, at least watching this, never really had to go hungry or was truly homeless. Like, you literally couldn't have went anywhere. That's the vast majority of us. But we call ourselves broke. Pretty much calling ourselves poor at the same time. But weren't we in school for like a decade? What did we learn there? Because we could have learned how the game of capital works, but did we? No, we just learned how to obey. We learned how to be a good worker, and I'm not even sure if that worked. So let's start with this one. Bruh. Before you blame yourself for being broke, you need to understand how the system you're in actually works. Because most people aren't struggling from a lack of effort, they're struggling from a lack of clarity. We're told to invest, save, budget, hustle, but almost nobody explains what money actually is or how it moves. Here's the part that sounds crazy at first. Most of the money in the economy isn't even real in the way you think. It's created through debt. When banks lend, they're not handing out existing piles of cash. They're creating new money out of thin air, tied to an obligation to pay it back. That means the system runs on borrowing, spending, and repayment cycles. Ray Dalio calls this the economic machine. It's driven by transactions, credit, and human behavior. When credit expands, people spend more, asset prices rise, and everything feels good. When credit contracts, the opposite happens. Things slow down, and suddenly, it feels like everything is falling apart. So if you feel like you're constantly behind, it's not just you. You're inside a system designed to move in cycles. And if you don't understand those cycles, you're always reacting instead of positioning yourself ahead of them. Can you believe that's all AI? Like, I know it sounds generic, but it kind of works. It does the trick. Alright. In these notes, what should I put? So, Realpolitik. Gen Z is broke. Problem. Gen Z is broke. Don't know how to fix. Low political. When I say low political power, yeah, sure. Let's just start with that. Let's get the video going. Yeah, this one's more simple.
And it is how the economic machine works in 30 minutes. The economy works like a simple machine, but many people don't understand it or they don't agree on how it works, and this has led to a lot of needless economic suffering. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economic template. Though it's unconventional, it has helped me to anticipate and to sidestep the global financial crisis, and it has worked well for me for over 30 years. Let's begin. Though the economy might seem complex, it works in a simple mechanical way. It's made up of a few simple parts and a lot of simple transactions that are repeated over and over again a zillion times. These transactions are above all else driven by human nature, and they create three main forces that drive the economy. Number one, productivity growth. Number two, the short-term debt cycle. And number three, the long-term debt cycle. We'll look at these three forces and how laying them on top of each other.
Alright, big three ideas for this video: productivity growth, short-term debt cycle, long-term debt cycle. Let's log those. Think they'll be useful later. Dang, did I forget how to use Obsidian? Nah. Economic machine. And this one's growth. And short-term debt cycle. This is the long-term debt cycle. It's been so long since I've used this. It's like slash something. Alright. Let me figure out Obsidian. Link nodes. Gotcha. Yeah, something like this. This is where we start. Yeah.
Term debt cycle. We'll look at these three forces and how laying them on top of each other creates a good template for tracking economic movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest part of the economy, transactions. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up, and a transaction is a very simple thing. You make transactions all the time. Every time you buy something, you create a transaction. Each transaction consists of a buyer exchanging money or credit with a seller for goods, services, or financial assets. Credit spends just like money, so adding together the money spent and the amount of credit spent,
All right. This is gonna be important. Um, Especially with this credit part.
you can know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity like credit with a seller for goods, services, or financial assets. Credit spends just like money, so adding together the money spent and the amount of credit spent, you can know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity sold, you get the price. And that's it. That's a transaction. It's the building block of the economic machine. All cycles and all forces in an economy are driven by transactions. So, if we can understand transactions, we can understand the whole economy. A market consists of all the buyers and all the sellers making transactions for the same thing. For example, there is a wheat market, a car market, a stock market, and markets for millions of things. An economy consists of all of the transactions in all of its markets. If you add up the total spending and the total quantity sold in all of the markets, you have everything you need to know to understand the economy. It's just that simple. People, businesses, banks, and governments all engage in transactions the way I just described, exchanging money and credit for goods, services, and financial assets. The biggest buyer and seller is the government, which consists of two important parts: a central government that collects taxes and spends money, and a central bank, which is different from other buyers and sellers because it controls the amount of money and credit in the economy. It does this by influencing interest rates and printing new money. For these reasons, as we'll see, the central bank is an important
Central bank, also the Federal Reserve, which we just had the main chairperson Jerome Powell leave, and he's getting replaced. He's still on the board, but it's going to be Kevin Warsh. This is our incoming Federal Reserve leader. Basically, what he's gonna do, he's gonna drop interest rates. That's the spoiler.
player in the flow of credit. I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably the least understood. It's the most important part because it's the biggest and most volatile part. Just like buyers and sellers go to the market to make transactions, so do lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something they can't afford, like a house or a car, or they want to invest in something like starting a business. Credit can help both lenders and borrowers get what they want. Borrowers promise to repay the amount they borrow, called principal, plus an additional amount, called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrowing because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay and lenders believe them, credit is created. Any two people.
Let's listen to that one more time, what they said.
When borrowers promise to repay and lenders believe them, credit is created.
When borrowers. Wait.
Because it's
I'm
cheaper.
so sorry. I just had
When
a brain
borrowers
fart.
promise to repay,
Alright, the language he used. When borrowers ask for money and the lending institution believes that they're able to pay them back, then that means that they're able to loan them money. That's going to be very important later. But that's how, as an overview, credit is created. It's the same with a bar tab. You go to a bar, order a drink, give them your card, they don't charge it until they close out for the night. So up until then, it's on credit. Now, once you pay it, then the credit, it gets annihilated by the money that you pay, and then the debt goes away. But we'll continue.
and lenders believe them, credit is created. Any two people can agree to create credit out of thin air. That seems simple enough, but credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is both an asset to the lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability disappear and the transaction is settled. So why is credit so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because one person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend, someone else earns, and every dollar you earn, someone else has spent.
I'm gonna note that down because that's pretty much a key. One person's spending is another person's income.
So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone's income rises, it makes lenders more willing to lend him money because now he's more worthy of credit. A credit-worthy borrower has two things, the ability to repay and collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his debt gives him the ability to repay. In the event that he can't repay, he has valuable assets to use as collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable lending him money. So increased income allows increased borrowing, which allows increased spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing, and so on. This self-reinforcing pattern leads to economic growth and is why we have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give something in order to get something, and how much you get depends on how much you produce. Over time, we learn, and that accumulated knowledge raises our living standards. We call this productivity growth. Those who are inventive and hardworking raise their productivity and their living standards faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that isn't necessarily true over the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver of economic swings. Debt is, because it allows us to consume more than we produce when we acquire it, and it forces us to consume less than we produce when we have to pay it back. Debt swings occur in two big cycles. One takes about 5.
Yeah, so if you borrow $100 and you use that to, let's say, pay for a meal today, you're essentially borrowing from your own future. So, let's say whenever it needs to be paid back, let's say in a week, you're going to be $100 poorer than what you have already been, potentially.
5 to 8 years, and the other takes about 75 to 100 years. While most people feel the swings, they typically...
But this is I'm getting ahead of where we're going, but credit, he said, people who have a higher ability to pay, banks want to lend to that person. So we're in a world where rich people actually get better loans, like lower interest rates, bigger numbers, all that, because they have stuff to lose, their income, assets that they own. But if you're broke and you have no income, like, how would you be able to get a loan? Like, how would you be able to promise to pay someone back? Like, no one really believes you, therefore you don't really get anything. So it's counterintuitive.
don't see them as cycles because they see them too up close, day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we're going to step back and look at these three big forces and how they interact to make up our experiences. As mentioned, swings around the line are not due to how much innovation or hard work there is. They're primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way I can increase my spending is to increase my income, which requires me to be more productive and do more work. Increased productivity is the only way for growth. Since my spending is another person's income, the economy grows every time I or anyone else is more productive. If we follow the transactions and play this out, we see a progression like the productivity growth line. But because we borrow, we have cycles. This isn't due to any laws or regulations, it's due to human nature and the way that credit works. Think of borrowing as simply a way of pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can't afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow from your future self. In doing so, you create a time in the future that you need to spend less than you make in order to pay it back. It very quickly resembles a cycle. Basically, anytime you borrow, you create a cycle. This is as true for an individual as it is for the economy. This is why understanding credit is so important, because it sets into motion a mechanical, predictable series of events that will happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is what you settle transactions with. When you buy a beer from a bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy a beer with credit, it's like starting a bar tab. You're saying you promise to pay in the future. Together, you and the bartender create an asset and a liability. You just created credit out of thin air. It's not until you pay the bar tab later that the asset and the liability disappear, the debt goes away, and the transaction is settled. The reality is that most of what people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only about $3
Literally, almost all the money that exists is not actual cash dollar bills that you can hold. The vast majority of it is debt. And here's the quirk about debt: debt needs to be paid off at a certain time.
trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way to increase your spending is to produce more. But in an economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and allows incomes to rise faster than productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. Now, don't get me wrong. Credit isn't necessarily something bad that just causes cycles. It's bad when it finances overconsumption that can't be paid back. However, it's good when it efficiently allocates resources and produces income so you can pay back the debt. For example, if you borrow money to buy a big TV, it doesn't generate income for you to pay back the debt. But if you borrow money to, say, buy a tractor, and that tractor lets you harvest more crops and earn more money, then you can pay back your debt and improve your living standards.
All right, another short lesson. So they kind of just put a little game. And what I mean by this was that they just showed you can either buy a flat screen TV, a whole entertainment center for your house with some debt. But what are you going to do with it? You're going to watch. You're going to watch some film, you're going to watch some movies, eat some popcorn, enjoy your life. But that's not creating value for someone else, so no one's going to pay you to watch TV, right? So when you take out your credit card and buy your stuff for that, you're borrowing from your own future, and when you borrow, you're paying interest. So you're getting poorer over time, at least financially speaking. But let's say use the same funds, but instead of buying an entertainment center with like your VR, your film with the flat screen TV, what else? I don't know, a mini fridge. Stuff that's not gonna produce more stuff. Instead of that, what if you bought a tractor? What if you bought some AI tool, AI agent? I don't know. But this now asset was able to produce value for other people, and those other people would give you money, and then you can use that money to pay off the debt. But what if the money that they're giving you for this asset and the work it's doing is more than the debt? You just got paid. You just got paid for buying something with money you didn't have. You're wealthy. Now, what happens if you took on debt and with that debt you paid for someone else's labor and then they can figure out how to make money? And then the money that they make, you give them a cut, you pay off your debt, and then you take the rest. The rest is yours, however much that is. If it's an extra $10 of profit, that's yours. If it's an extra $1 million of profit, that's yours. This game is broken. I'm just telling you that.
In an economy with credit, we can follow the transactions and see how credit creates growth. Let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $100,000 a year and have no debt. You are creditworthy enough to borrow $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $110,000 even though you only earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. The person earning $110,000 with no debt can borrow $11,000, so he can spend $121,000 even though he has only earned $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transactions, we can begin to see how this process works in a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember, borrowing creates cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us into the short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases, we see an expansion, the first phase of the short-term debt cycle. Spending continues to increase and prices start to rise. This happens because the increase in spending is fueled by credit, which can be created instantly out of thin air. When the amount of spending and incomes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes problems. Seeing prices rise, it raises interest rates. With higher interest rates, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of existing debts rises. Think about this as the monthly payments on your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and have higher debt repayments, they have less money left over to spend, so spending slows. And since one person's spending is another person's income, production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this create cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us into the short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases, we see an expansion, the first phase of the short-term debt cycle. Spending continues to increase and prices start to rise. This happens because the increase in spending is fueled by credit, which can be created instantly out of thin air. When the amount of spending and incomes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes problems. Seeing prices rise, it raises interest rates.
Basically, what that part was saying is that, let's say the banks, they were told, hey, now's a good time to start loaning out money. Loan out money to everybody. Everybody with a job. Doesn't even have to be a good job. Just you have a job, have a $10,000 credit card. Because the amount of purchasing power increased, and let's assume that the stuff that's produced is the amount is the same, through osmosis, economic osmosis, prices will start to rise because there's more money in the system and we're dealing with limited resources. So there's a term called elasticity. And basically, what that means, if I remember correctly, elasticity is the consumer's willingness to pay higher for things. So let's give an example. Water. You need water to survive. If the price of water was $1 billion or you die, you're going to pay $1 billion because you don't want to die. Assuming you had $1 billion. The price of water is elastic. It's whatever people are willing to pay. But if, let's say, we're saying a really cool graphics card, let's say a RTX, blah, blah, blah. Now at $500, $600, it's okay, the MSRP or whatever. But if it was $1 billion, you don't really need that graphics card. There are other things to spend your money on. That kind of purchase is inelastic because it doesn't stretch as much. But water, it's, you know, people will pay as much as they need to.
With higher interest rates, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of existing debts rises. Think about this as the monthly payments on your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and have higher debt repayments, they have less money left over to spend, so spending slows. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop, and so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases, and we have a recession. If the recession becomes too severe and inflation is no longer a problem, the central bank will lower interest rates to cause everything to pick up again. With low interest rates.
Yeah, so that's where we are right now as we're going to the next Federal Reserve Chairman. For the U.S. specifically, our economy is over-indexed in tech, like Google, Apple, Netflix. They're starting laying off a bunch of people. Let's see in the past year how many tech workers laid off. 2026. As of late April, over 100,000. No, I'm not talking about globally. USA. Oh, Oracle lost 20,000, Amazon lost 16,000, Facebook lost 8,000, Dell lost 10,000, and Block lost a few thousand. So, and these are the people making buttloads of money. Meta, median, pay. No way. Let's just say it was like a couple 100,000. That was the median. Or even like 100K. That's a lot of money. Like, that's a lot of money that they're not being paid now. Instead of bringing in 10K a month, now they're bringing in zero. Maybe they can find like some Uber. Maybe they can make a couple thousand, but they're not being paid the big bucks anymore. What's that gonna do to the economy?
Rates, debt repayments are reduced, and borrowing and spending pick up, and we see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is constrained only by the willingness of lenders and borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is easily available, there's an economic expansion. When credit isn't easily available, there's a recession. To cause everything to pick up again. With low interest rates, debt repayments are reduced, and borrowing and spending pick up, and we see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is constrained only by the willingness of lenders and borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is easily available.
I want to get the exact language down. Spending is constrained by borrowers.
There's an economic expansion. When credit isn't easily available, there's a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for decades. But notice that the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth than the previous cycle.
Alright, it's actually kind of interesting to see how consistent it is. Like the economy goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Cause what can we say that we experienced a crash in like the 2020? Let's say that one doesn't count. Let's say that one doesn't count. The last big one was the Great Recession in '08. And then the one before that was a tech crash in '01. That's about 7 years. And then before that, what was before? Um, yeah, the dot com bubble was 2001. Economic crash in 80s, 90s. What was the popular one? There was an early 80s recession, there was an early 90s recession. It's pretty much every 5 to 10 years. And it's predictable because borrowing creates cycles and people love to borrow money and banks want to lend.
Cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people push it. They have an inclination to borrow and spend more instead of paying back debt. It's human nature. Because of this, over long periods of time, debts rise faster than incomes, creating the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more indebted, lenders even more freely extend credit. Why? Because everyone thinks things are going great. People are just focused on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising. Asset values are going up. The stock market roars. It's a boom. It pays to buy goods, services, and financial assets with borrowed money. When people do a lot of that, we call it a bubble. So even though debts have been growing, incomes have been growing nearly as fast to offset them. Let's call the ratio of debt to income the debt burden. So long as incomes continue to...
This was the past 5 years. If you're in the US stock market, you just want to be a part of it in general. If you put your money 5 years ago in the S&P 500, it was at 4,000. Now it's at 7,000. That's pretty much double in 5 years.
to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time,
Oh, and most of that is debt based. The value is debt based because we have people taking out loans to buy these stocks because they know it's going to go up. So you might as well buy as much as you can.
asset values soar. People borrow huge amounts of money to buy assets as investments,
Yes, yeah.
causing their prices to rise even higher. People feel wealthy. So even with the accumulation of lots of debt, rising incomes and asset values help borrowers remain creditworthy for a long time. But this obviously cannot continue forever. And it doesn't. Over decades, debt burdens slowly increase, creating larger and larger debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments start growing faster than incomes, forcing people to cut back on their spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing to go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further.
We're about here. People are losing jobs, they're not able to spend as much. Actually, it's more nuanced than that. It's more like the bottom 20-30% is really having a hard time, and the people like top 20%, they're keeping the spending going. So on paper it looks like the economy is growing, but what does it mean to grow? What does it mean to grow really?
And the cycle reverses itself. This is the long-term debt peak. Debt burdens have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, this happened in 2008. It happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989 and in the United States back in 1929. Now the economy begins deleveraging. In deleveraging, people cut spending, income. It happened
total US debt as a percent of GDP. Ooh, god damn. Alright, oh, uh, this is very high. So basically, the graph is charting how much as a country we owe to other countries and investors over how much money we make or how much stuff gets produced. So right now we're at 120%. So for every $100 that gets spent in the economy, like I'm just saying, like you go into the grocery store, CEOs buying yachts, damn, everything. We owe 20% more of that on debt. Which means if everything was just sold for free and used to pay for the debt, which isn't even possible, but if that happened, it would take us longer than a year. And that's for everyone to do that. Yeah, this is gonna be an interesting decade.
Happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989 and in the United States back in 1929. Now the economy begins deleveraging. In a deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed, the stock market crashes, social tensions rise, and the whole thing starts to feed on itself the other way. As incomes fall
We start getting more Luigi's.
and debt repayments rise, borrowers get squeezed. No longer creditworthy, credit dries up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make their debt repayments. Scrambling to fill this hole, borrowers are forced to sell assets. The rush to sell assets floods the market at the same time as spending falls. This is when the stock market collapses, the real estate market tanks, and banks get into trouble. As asset prices drop, the value of the collateral borrowers can put up drops. This makes borrowers even less creditworthy. People feel poor. Credit rapidly disappears. Less spending, less income, less wealth, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This appears similar to a recession, but the difference here is that interest rates can't be lowered to save the day. In a recession, lowering interest rates works to stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lowering interest rates doesn't work because interest rates are already low and soon hit 0%. So the stimulation ends. Interest rates in the United States hit 0% during the deleveraging of the 1930s and again in 2008. The difference between a recession and a deleveraging is that in a deleveraging, borrowers' debt burdens have simply gotten too big and can't be relieved by lowering interest rates. Lenders realize that debts have become too large to ever be fully paid.
Alright, I think we're ready for the next video. I think we got enough lessons for now. Let's go to the other one because this is more boring, but oh my god, is it essential. Rich people know this so well, and schools don't teach this at all. It's so weird. It's so weird to see because people spend their whole lives chasing money and don't know how it moves. That's low key disturbing. It's like I'm in a horror film. But we're gonna fix that today. Gonna fix that today. I don't even know how I discovered this video, but I did. Yes, it's boring. But it's worth it. I'm gonna take a break, but they should stay.
Two great mysteries dominate our lives, love and money. What is love is a question that has been endlessly explored in stories, songs, books, movies, and television. But the same cannot be said about the question, what is money? It's not surprising that monetary theory hasn't inspired any blockbuster movies, but it was not even mentioned at the schools most of us attended. For most of us, the question, where does money come from, brings to mind a picture of the mint printing bills and stamping coins. Money, most of us believe, is created by the government. It's true, but only to a point. Those metal and paper symbols of value we usually think of as money are indeed produced by an agency of the federal government called the Mint. But the vast majority of money is not created by the Mint. It is created in huge amounts every day by private corporations known as banks. Most of us believe that banks lend out money that has been entrusted to them by depositors. Easy to picture, but not the truth. In fact, banks create the money they loan, not from the bank's own earnings, not from the money deposited, but directly from the borrower's promise to repay. The borrower's signature on the loan papers is an obligation to pay the bank the amount of the loan plus interest, or lose the house, the car, whatever asset was pledged as collateral. That's a big commitment from the borrower. What does the same signature require of the bank? The bank gets to conjure into existence the amount of the loan and just write it into the borrower's account. Sound far-fetched? Surely that can't be true. But it is. To demonstrate how this miracle of modern banking came about, consider this simple story, the goldsmith's tale. Once upon various times, pretty much anything was used as money. It just had to be portable, and enough people had to have faith that it could later be exchanged for things of real value, like food, clothing, and shelter. Shells, cocoa beans, pretty stones, even feathers have been used as money. Gold and silver were attractive, soft, and easy to work with, so some cultures became expert with these metals. Goldsmiths made trade much easier by casting coins, standardized units of these metals whose weight and purity was certified. Well, to protect his gold, the goldsmith needed a vault, and soon his fellow townsmen were knocking on his door, wanting to rent space to safeguard their own coins and valuables. Before long, the goldsmith was renting every shelf in the vault and earning a small income from his vault rental business. Years went by, and the goldsmith made an astute observation. Depositors rarely came in to remove their actual physical gold, and they never all came in at once. That was because the claim checks the goldsmith had written as receipts for the gold were being traded in the marketplace as if they were the gold itself. This paper money was far more convenient than heavy coins, and amounts could simply be written instead of laboriously counted one by one for each transaction. Meanwhile, the goldsmith had another business. He lent out his gold, charging interest. Well, as convenient claim check money came into acceptance, borrowers began asking for their loans in the form of these claim checks instead of the actual metal. As industry expanded, more and more people asked the goldsmith for loans. This gave the goldsmith an even better idea. He knew that very few of his depositors ever removed their actual gold, so the goldsmith figured he could easily get away with lending out claim checks against his depositors' gold, in addition to his own. As long as the loans were repaid, his depositors would be none the wiser and no worse off, and the goldsmith, now more banker than artisan, would make a far greater profit than he could by lending only his own gold. For years, the goldsmith secretly enjoyed a good income from the interest earned on everybody else's deposits. Now a prominent lender, he grew steadily richer than his fellow townsmen, and he flaunted it. Suspicions grew that he was spending his depositors' money. His depositors got together and threatened withdrawal of their gold if the goldsmith didn't come clean about his newfound wealth. Contrary to what one might expect, this did not turn out to be a disaster for the goldsmith. Despite the duplicity inherent in his scheme, his idea did work. The depositors had not lost anything. Their gold was all safe in the goldsmith's vault. Well, rather than taking back their gold, the depositors demanded that the goldsmith, now their banker, cut them in by paying them a share of the interest. And that was the beginning of banking. The banker paid a low interest rate on deposits of other people's money that he then loaned out at a higher interest. The difference covered the bank's cost of operation and its profit. The logic of this system was simple, and it seemed like a reasonable way to satisfy the demand for credit. However, this is not the way banking works today. Our goldsmith banker was not content with the income remaining after sharing the interest earnings with his depositors, and the demand for credit was growing fast as Europeans spread out across the world. But his loans were limited by the amount of gold his depositors had in his vault. That's when he got an even bolder idea. Since no one but himself knew what was actually in his vaults, he could lend out claim checks on gold that wasn't even there. As long as all the claim check holders didn't come to the vault at the same time and demand real gold, how would anyone find out? This new scheme worked very well, and the banker became enormously wealthy on the interest paid on gold that did not exist. The idea that the banker would just create money out of nothing was too outrageous to believe, so for a
People still don't really understand.
long time the thought did not occur to people. But the power to just invent money went to the banker's head, as you can well imagine. In time, the magnitude of the banker's loans and his ostentatious wealth did trigger suspicions once again. Some borrowers started to demand real gold instead of paper representations. Rumors spread. Suddenly, several wealthy depositors showed up to remove their gold. The game was up. A sea of claim check holders flooded the street outside the closed doors of the bank. Alas, the banker did not have enough gold and silver to redeem all the paper he had put into their hands. This is called a run on the bank, and it is what every banker dreads. This phenomenon of a run on the bank ruined individual banks and, not surprisingly, damaged public confidence in all bankers. It would have been straightforward to outlaw the practice of creating money from nothing. But the large volumes of credit the bankers were offering had become essential to the success of European commercial expansion, so instead the practice was legalized and regulated. Bankers agreed to abide by limits on the amount of fictional loan money that could be lent out. The limit would still be a number much larger than the actual value of gold and silver in the vault. Quite often the ratio was 9 fictional dollars to 1 actual.
I'll tell you this. Here's why, even though this process makes the money that we have worth less over time, this is why it's still kept. The people who are able to take out like big loans from the bank are the same people who are able to organize labor to actually build something of value. Now, of course, people are taking out loans to buy like random bullshit too, but when we're talking about business loans, That's actually capital being put to work. It's kind of like centralization, but it's centralized uh, in capital. It's capitalism. We're centralizing labor into capital. Now, what the hell do I mean by that? So let's say that there's a business. We'll call it Amazon. And Amazon, they're able to serve their customers well in San Francisco, California. Let's say that. They're going to have some extra money on hand. Now, they can either just cash out of that, spend it on that flat screen TV, just enjoy the rest of their days, or they can use that when now it's capital, they can use that money as capital and then buy another warehouse, buy a robot, pay for more customer service. All that is organizing the environment around them into the capital. Because they have money, they're able to orient the environment around them. So instead of like China, like a communist structure where it's one small body that's deciding for all, it's more like a lot of different smaller ones deciding. There still is a asymmetry because as a worker, this doesn't feel like we have a choice. All we have is like work for this shitty company or that shitty company for that shitty wage. The vast majority of people, that's what they feel like. But yeah, it's the game of capital. We are worshiping capital over here. That's why we praise people like Bezos, Elon Musk, not Tim Cook, Steve Jobs. We're capitalists over here.
Actual dollar and gold. These regulations were enforced by surprise inspections. It was also arranged that, in the event of a run, central banks would support local banks with emergency infusions of gold. Only if there were runs on a lot of banks simultaneously would the banker's credit bubble burst and the system come crashing down. Over the years, the fractional reserve system and its integrated network of banks backed by a central bank has become the dominant money system of the world. At the same time, the fraction of gold backing the debt money has steadily shrunk to nothing. The basic nature of money has changed. In the past, a paper dollar was actually a receipt that could be redeemed for a fixed weight of gold or silver. In the present, a paper or digital dollar can only be redeemed for another paper or digital dollar. In the past, privately created bank credit existed only in the form of private banknotes, which people had the choice to refuse, just as we have the choice to refuse someone's private check today. In the present, privately created bank credit is legally convertible to government-issued fiat currency, the dollars, loonies, and pounds we habitually think of as money. Fiat currency is money created by government fiat or decree, and legal tender laws declare that citizens must accept this fiat money as payment for debt, or else the courts will not enforce the obligation. So now the question is, if governments and banks can both just create money, then how much money exists? In the past, the total amount of money in existence was limited to the actual physical quantities of whatever commodity was in use as money. For example, in order for new gold or silver money to be created, more gold or silver had to be found and dug out of the ground. In the present, money is literally created as debt. New money is created whenever anyone takes a loan from the bank. As a result, the total amount of money that can be created has only one real limit: the total level of debt.
Remember that last video? 3 out of the $50 trillion of spending power in this economy. 3 out of 50. So, like, that's pretty much 5%. 5% of the economy is with real money. 95% is debt. 95% of the economy is debt.
Governments place an additional statutory limit on the creation of new money by enforcing rules known as fractional reserve requirements. Essentially arbitrary, fractional reserve requirements vary from country to country and from time to time. In the past, it was common to require banks to have at least $1 worth of real gold in the vault to back $10 worth of debt money created. Today, reserve requirement ratios no longer apply to the ratio of new money to gold on deposit, but merely to the ratio of new debt money to existing debt money on deposit in the bank.
Yeah, so I laugh because if people understand this, there would be a riot. There would be a riot. So not only could a bank, like they have to limit their lending based off of how much deposits that they have from people saving their money with them. So let's say they have $10,000. The bank has $10,000 that they can loan based off of. If they can loan 90% of what they have, then that means they could loan out 9 grand to someone else. So out of that $10,000, now there's technically $19,000 in the system. But what happens if someone takes out their loan and then they put it back in the bank? Now the bank has 19,000 of deposits, and 90% of 19 is what, like 15,000. Now the bank can loan out based off of, like, it makes no sense. Like, what game are we playing?
Today, a bank's reserves consist of two things: the amount of government-issued cash or equivalent that the bank has deposited with a central bank, plus the amount of already existing debt money the bank has on deposit. To illustrate this in a simple way, let's imagine that a new bank has just started up and has no depositors yet. However, the bank's investors have made a reserve deposit of $1,111.12 of existing cash money at the central bank. The required reserve ratio is 9-to-1. Step 1. The doors open and the new bank welcomes its first loan customer. He needs $10,000 to buy a car. At the 9-to-1 reserve ratio, the new bank's reserve at the central bank, also known as high-powered money, allows it to legally conjure into existence 9 times that amount, or $10,000, on the basis of the borrower's pledge of debt. This $10,000 is not taken from anywhere. It's brand new money simply typed into the borrower's account as bank credit. The borrower then writes a check on that bank credit to buy the used car. Step 2. The seller then deposits this newly created $10,000 at her bank. Unlike the high-powered government money deposited at the central bank, this newly created credit money cannot be multiplied by the reserve ratio. Instead, it's divided by the reserve ratio. At a ratio of 9-to-1, a new loan of $9,000 can be created on the basis of the $10,000 deposit. Step 3. If that $9,000 is then deposited by a third party at the same bank that created it or at a different one, it becomes the legal basis for a third issue of bank credit, this time for the amount of $8,100. Like one of those Russian dolls where each layer contains a slightly smaller doll inside, each new deposit contains the potential for a slightly smaller loan in an infinitely decreasing series. Now, if the loan money created is not deposited at the bank, the process stops. That's the unpredictable part of the money creation mechanism. But more likely, at every step, the new money will be deposited at a bank, And the reserve ratio process can repeat itself over and over until almost $100,000 of brand new money has been created within the banking system. All of this new money has been created entirely from debt, and the whole process has been legally authorized by the initial reserve deposit of just $1,111.12, which is still sitting untouched at the central bank. What's more, under this ingenious system, the books of each bank in the chain must show that the bank has 10% more on deposit than it has out on loan. This gives banks a very real incentive to seek deposits in order to be able to make loans, supporting the general but misleading impression that loans come out of deposits. Now,
And this is why I feel bad for savers, because in this country, after after I don't want to say we because I'm not the country, but after we got off the gold standard, there is no reason to save anymore. After like maybe having your emergency fund, you might as well just have your money in like stock or business assets or gold or now Bitcoin. Because if you save, let's say you worked really hard for like 20 years and now you have like an extra $1 million that you want to last the rest of your life. If you just save that money, your nest egg is going to lose value over time without you even touching it. You get penalized. You get encouraged to do something or you get fucked over. Isn't that weird? And it's like easy to just say, oh, this is a whole conspiracy. The rich people don't want you to know this. Like, of course, they don't want more competition, but the schools don't teach this. The teachers don't teach this. Your parents don't teach this. The algorithms is not gonna push you to this. This has 250,000 views. And it was made 13 years ago. No one cares about this that much. We're more interested in Clay Thompson and Megan Thee Stallion. Fact of life. Now, because we are a part of the privileged with this information, we can use it. We can exploit the ignorance of the masses. Just saying.
unless all the successive loans are deposited at the same bank, it cannot be said that any one bank got to multiply its initial high-powered money reserve almost 90 times by issuing bank credit out of nothing. However, the banking system is a closed loop. Bank credit created at one bank becomes a deposit in another, and vice versa. In a theoretical world of perfectly equal exchanges, the ultimate effect would be exactly the same as if the whole process took place within one bank. That is, the bank's initial central bank reserve of a little...
Alright, being real, I'm kind of bored, and I don't know how much of this you're interested in, whoever's watching. Alright, time for the real conversation. So, most of Gen Z is broke. We have been told over the past, 20 years of our lives that, you go this path. You do good in school, in elementary, you do good in high school, you do good in college, maybe take more extracurriculars, stuff like that, and then you get a good job. And then after a good job, you're set. How's that working out? How is it working out? Let's see how that's working out right now. But what are the people saying? And we call this the American. Oh my god. I don't want to sign up. Fine, I'll sign. I'll sign in. Firefox. No. I just got like a really weird video to start out with, and it's kind of making me worried. I'm gonna show you what it is. I just want to sign in first. Yeah, the kids are cooked. Kids are cooked. um, Let me add it. Window. Without a tab. Yeah, I think it's this one. Alright, I didn't get it. It was some AI fruit thing. I think we need to stop with that. It's getting a little out of hand. Video. It was this. It was this. We're all gonna watch this.
I didn't mean it.
Don't worry, sweetheart. Dad understands.
Alright, that's funny.
Daddy! Mommy, I didn't mean it!
Is there a cure for her, doctor? Hopeless case. First time offense, minor severity, therefore a warning is sufficient. Detain the defendant till the farting stops. Get in, you stinker!
Help me. Help me.
I move to banish her from the planet.
I approve.
Hurry up, you stinker!
Finally, she's gone back to her own planet.
I don't know, man. This is a bit much. This is me. I'd even sign in. And this is on a new browser account. So there was no personalization. So this is a completely random thing. And this was the first thing. It has 1.5 million likes and 100,000 saves. We are cooked. Alright, so how is that American dream working out? That 9 to 5 life. What? I thought I already signed in. I'm tripping. I'm tripping.
Hi, I'm here for the American Dream. Oh, great. Go ahead and line up right over there. Awesome, thanks. Hi, one American Dream, please. Well, first you'll need a $40,000 college degree. Oh, I came to this country with only $5 in my pocket. No problem. Take this $40,000 debt and head to the next station. Awesome, thank you. Hi, American. Now that you have a college degree, you'll need a car to get to your job. Oh, okay. That'll be $20,000. I don't take this debt and head over there. Next. $400,000 to buy your house. Take this debt and keep in mind, by the time you pay this house off in 30 years, you would have paid us $500,000 in interest. So the house will end up costing you $1 million. I don't think I can afford this. Oh, and if you get a raise at work, be sure to upgrade your car. And when can I expect to retire? I mean, you got stuff to pay for, so 65 if you're lucky. This is not a dream, it's a nightmare. Hi, I'm here for the American...
Yes, it's actually a scam. If you go the normal route and do what the person next to you is doing, or what would do in your shoes, you're going to end up broke. The baby boomers right now, they had the best economy, and still a third of them have no retirement savings. How? When they were an adult, houses were like 5K. They had the chance to buy the top companies pennies on the dollar. Makes no sense, but they were so sure that they were gonna make it that all they had to do was just get a job and, I don't know, pay Social Security and they would be covered, but life got in the way. Life got in the way of their own life. And now we have, I think David Schweikert was talking about this. Really? I either spelled it wrong or no one cares about him.
A little while ago, and some of the things that get said around here, you just shake your head. So think about some of the things we're hearing from the press, from the Democrats, just panic-stricken. I need to actually walk the American people and our own staff through a little bit of facts and a little bit of the truth. We've done multiple presentations here saying, if you want to find waste and fraud, if you want to find programs that are misdesigned, other things that are
10%. Somehow we have 10% of baby boomers who are, by USA definition, poor. And then how many of them have no retirement savings, so just paycheck to paycheck right now? Wait, what? So it's somewhere between 20% and 50% have no meaningful amount saved after having a life where they had the best economy at the best of time in the best place, and still half are pretty much poor with nothing. How does that happen? That's honestly very surprising. That's impressive. That's very impressive. So, quite frankly, I don't really feel like watching those videos anymore. If you want to learn more, you can watch those videos and take your own notes. You could even, I don't know, you can message me if you have a question about it. I've watched those videos like 20 times in a row, so now I just kind of check out. But I'm thinking maybe I should have some sort of way of educating other people. I'm not even the best at this. Like, I'm only 23 and I haven't even utilized most of these things yet. But I've went to multiple people that wanted to give me financial advice. And for some reason they don't include how capitalism works. How the fuck does that make sense? Why the fuck are we in a world where the teachers don't understand, the people who say that they're in they're financial educators don't understand? uh, I've done marketing for school. I don't even think my program mentor or the the teachers know. It's like, why am I even here? Like, what are you guys doing? I'm just listening to a bunch of broke people. So you can't do that and expect to not be broke. We have to do something most people aren't doing. If your goal is to not be broke. All right, now we're at the end. Now, now we give the real solution. This was just a test. All right, we're going through a lot of political turmoil. We got wars. Got war in Israel. Got war in Iran. We got a bunch of stuff going on in the Caribbean. But there's also a bunch of stuff happening in the US. There's probably a bunch of stuff happening in the state that you're in. In the town and county. How about you focus on the things that's right around you rather than the whole entire world? Because how can you have the whole world on your shoulders and you are expected to carry it all? How egocentric do you have to be to think that's gonna work? It's not. You only have one human brain, one human body, only so much you can do. And you also have to take care of yourself. So that already places restrictions. So here's what I did. I see as my tribe, my community. It's easy to go by age group. We had like similar experiences. And I know the problems that they're going through right now. We're broke, we're confused. A lot of us feel stuck, blah 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 blah. Everything seems unclear right now. But here's one thing. We are going to need to learn how to build community. Because if you're going to be a solo person for these next, I don't know, 5-10 years or something, you're going to be missing out on a lot of opportunities. Because one, you wouldn't like attract them, and two, you wouldn't be able to execute on all of them that come your way. So I guess that's the lesson. We should work together. Oh, it's been an hour and a half. There's a lot I want to say. It's like I want to make financial education, but it has to be worth it. I don't know how many people want that. I know people need it, but if it's not going to get clicked on, it's like there's no point in making it. Um, but where I want to take the channel, might as well take it back. Right now, I am kind of getting rid of a lot of projects that doesn't need to be focused on right now. But one of them that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later is going to involve building a valuable skill set, inviting others to partner with me. We make money together, we can travel together, and just build together because, we only have one life. Might as well, even, you know, with the career stuff, might as well have it collaborative rather than just like competition all the time. But I'm going to link resources to this video so you can watch it and take notes on your own time, because for me it took, I would say, at least 3 to 5 times to understand what is being said, because all of this is new information, completely new. It's a shame. So I'm gonna get on to building, blah blah blah. I'll see you later.